everybody, I'm Alice K. Ruckelhaus from SufferingWell, and I bet you can figure out within a few seconds why I'm in a church. Supposedly, I'm actually at my office at home, but it looks like a church, right? So today we're talking about finding Jesus in the temple. There are two fruits that I often see with this, and I kind of want to talk about both of them. One is piety and one is zeal for God. So let's talk about the story first and what happened. So when Jesus was 12 years old, he and his parents went to Jerusalem for one of the festivals. They went with a lot of family members and they traveled with those family members. So it's kind of easy to see how they didn't notice that Jesus was missing right away. But they did notice that he was missing, and obviously that worried them. And I kind of inappropriately think that it's sort of funny. They lost God, but if that's inappropriate, just blame it on my autism. Anyway, there's two ways of looking at that. One, they lost God, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, it's a big deal to lose any child, but especially God. On the other hand, he was God. Maybe he could have found his way home. But it's always better to travel with a large group in that kind of situation because, they may have been traveling through places where there were robbers and stuff like that. That was very common. So it's best to stay together. At any rate, Mary and Joseph were concerned. They didn't just think, he can find his way back. He's God. After all, he can probably just, transport himself. They didn't think that at all. They went immediately to Jerusalem and spent 3 days looking for him. When they finally found him, he was in the temple and he was teaching the teachers of the law. So he was 12 and he was teaching them. All right. So that's one of your indications of what kind of man this is going to be, right? And apparently, it sounds from reading the passage like those teachers were really impressed and respectful of him and everything. They weren't saying, "Get out of here, you stupid kid," or anything like that. They were listening to him. They were discussing it with him. And when Mary and Joseph found him, they were really relieved. And just like any other mother, "Son, why did you worry us so much? What would you do this?" And Jesus just very calmly said to them, "Didn't you know that I must be about my Father's business?" After that, he went home with them, and the Bible said that he grew in obedience, and which didn't mean he became more obedient. He already was completely obedient, but he submitted himself to them, and he continued to grow and to learn. So how does piety and zeal for God come out of this story? So piety, first of all, because you see Jesus wanting to be in his Father's house. And it's kind of the same thing as zeal for God. He wanted to be about his Father's business at an early age. And he probably was. We don't have really any other record of what he did when he was a child. And so he was probably already going about his Father's business in various ways. But the other thing is the zeal, that passion that he had to be about his Father's business. And we see that coming out. Well, we see it all through his ministry and his life, and especially in his death. But we see that coming out again very specifically when he cleanses the temple. And the gospel writer, I think it was probably Matthew, but I don't remember for sure. I'll try to remember to put the reference below. Quoted from the Old Testament and said, "Zeal for thy house has consumed me." Jesus had an intense zeal for God. And we want to have that too. So that's not really our natural way, is it? Because sometimes it's really easy to the world is here in front of us, and all the material things and caring about what people think and everything, that seems to affect us more on a daily life. Whereas heaven and God seem a little bit more distant, which is another reason why we want to practice disattachment. So how do we develop zeal for God? Again, I think that's something that you can't just say, "Oh, today I'm going to be zealous for God." No, it's something that you build by growing closer and closer to him. Do you kind of see a pattern in these fruits? A lot of them have to do with growing closer to God. In fact, I think you could make an argument that they all have to do with growing closer to God. So here are some questions for you to ask as you ponder this particular mystery. Am I zealous for God? Do I have that piety, that desire to really follow hard after God and to do his work? If so, what are some ways that I can improve and become even more zealous for him? And if not, how can I become more zealous? And first of all, I would say, ask the Holy Spirit to help you. Secondly, like I talked about in a different video, find friends who are zealous for God. You're going to be like the people that you hang out with. Another thing to ask is my zeal ever inappropriately expressed? Because sometimes zeal for God, our desire for righteousness in ourselves, can turn into not just a desire for righteousness in others, that's a good thing, but maybe condemnation for others when they don't match our zeal. So we have to be careful about that. But then how can I encourage them to be more zealous for God? How can I encourage them? Maybe through my example, maybe through little tiny conversations. Talking about it too much can be overwhelming. It can really turn people off. But if somebody's open to it, then you can talk with them about it. Praying with others, because as you pray together, I don't know, you're able to influence each other as you hear somebody else's prayers and you go, oh, wow, I hadn't thought about having that kind of attitude towards God, or I hadn't thought of having that kind of attitude towards other people. And so that's also a way that you can learn to be and develop more zealous, more zeal. So anyway, I hope that gives you some things to think about in this. Just ponder the story. Imagine Mary and Joseph's zeal and their very, very strong desire to find Jesus. And compare that also with when I turn away from Jesus a little bit, when I sin. And so, as Augustine said, I'm in the cave and I can't see the sun anymore. How do I come out of the cave? How do I stop sinning in that way so that I can stay in the light of his sunshine? How can I grow in zeal for God instead of for the things of this earth or the things that please me? All right. I love you all. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.